The North Atlantic. March 1943. Captain Wilhelm Schmidt peers through his periscope as convoy SC-122 crawls across the black water above him. 40 merchant ships. Thousands of tons of fuel, ammunition, food, Britain's lifeline. His U-boat is one of 15 wolves circling this flock. Fire one, Schmidt whispers. The torpedo strikes the lead freighter at 0237 hours. Then another, and another. Within 5 days, 22 ships will lie at the bottom of the Atlantic, the highest loss rate of any North Atlantic convoy in the entire war. This is the air gap, a 600-mile stretch of ocean where no land-based aircraft can reach. Here, the U-boats hunt freely. In October 1942 alone, they sank 56 ships totaling 258,000 tons in this killing zone. From January to August 1942, German submarines destroyed 609 Allied vessels, 3.1 million tons of shipping, for the loss of only 22 U-boats. The Germans called it the happy time. Winston Churchill knew Britain was losing. At this rate, the island nation would be starved into surrender within months. The solution seemed obvious: aircraft carriers to provide air cover over the gap. But there was a catastrophic problem. Steel and aluminum were desperately needed elsewhere, and existing carriers couldn't be spared. In a smoky combined operations office in London, a man with wild hair and wilder ideas stares at shipping charts covered in red marks. Each one a sunken ship, each one representing hundreds of drowned sailors. Geoffrey Pyke is neither an engineer nor a naval architect nor a scientist. He's a journalist and educator who once escaped a German prison camp by studying escape statistics and climbing over a fence. What he's about to propose will make military brass question his sanity. What they don't know is that within 6 months, this madman's idea will have Churchill's full backing, consume millions in secret funding, and nearly change the course of the war. What they don't know is that he wants to build the largest aircraft carrier ever conceived, not from steel, not from wood, but from ice. The Battle of the Atlantic is a mathematics problem written in blood. German Admiral Karl Donitz calculated that if his U-boats could sink 700,000 tons of Allied shipping per month, Britain would collapse. By March 1943, they're exceeding that target, sinking 693,389 tons, while U-boat losses remain manageable at 15 submarines. The equation is simple and terrifying. Germany is winning. The Royal Navy tried everything. Destroyers equipped with Aztec sonar hunted submarines, but couldn't cover the entire Atlantic. Depth charges killed U-boats when they could find them. Escort carriers provided air cover, but HMS Audacity, the first escort carrier deployed, was sunk after just 2 days of her first major operation. The core problem remained unchanged. The mid-Atlantic air gap stretched 600 miles across open ocean. Land-based aircraft from Canada, Greenland, and Iceland simply couldn't reach that far. Conventional aircraft carriers required steel, hundreds of thousands of tons of it. Steel that was needed for tanks, fighters, battleships, and the million other demands of total war. Naval architects presented options. All were impossible. Build more carriers? Steel allocations were already stretched beyond breaking. Convert merchant ships? The conversions took too long, and the resulting vessels were vulnerable. Refuel aircraft mid-ocean? The technology didn't exist. Expert consensus: there was no solution. The convoys would have to accept their losses. The sailors would have to accept that when a torpedo struck at 0200 hours in the middle of the Atlantic, no help was coming. They would die in the cold and the dark, and the war effort would continue without them. This was the calculation the Admiralty had accepted when Geoffrey Pyke walked into Lord Louis Mountbatten's office in September 1942, carrying a 232-page memorandum. Mountbatten, as Chief of Combined Operations, had assembled a team of unconventional thinkers to solve impossible problems. He'd recruited scientists, inventors, and yes, even a journalist who'd broken out of a German internment camp. The Navy called them Mountbatten's Circus, and not as a compliment. Pyke's memorandum detailed something that seemed to violate both physics and common sense: using ice and supercooled water for military applications. The centerpiece was a proposal to construct aircraft carriers from frozen water, vessels that would be unsinkable, immune to torpedoes, and could be manufactured for 1% of the energy cost of steel ships. When Pyke presented his idea to naval engineers, they laughed him out of the room. Ice. Ice melts. Ice cracks. Icebergs roll over unexpectedly. Natural icebergs have surfaces too small for runways. The entire concept violated decades of shipbuilding knowledge. That's impossible, the senior engineers declared. You can't build a ship from ice. The material science doesn't exist. This is engineering fantasy. But Mountbatten didn't dismiss it. He recognized that desperate times demanded desperate thinking. If the Battle of the Atlantic was lost, Hitler would win the war. Period. Conventional solutions had failed. Perhaps it was time to try something inconceivable. He forwarded Pyke's memorandum up the chain of command with a single note. This man may be onto something. The stakes couldn't be higher. Every week, thousands of tons of shipping went to the bottom. Every month, hundreds of sailors drowned in the freezing Atlantic. The blockade was tightening. Britain's food reserves were measured in weeks, not months. Someone had to do something impossible. Geoffrey Nathaniel Joseph Pyke possessed exactly 0 qualifications to revolutionize naval warfare. Born November 9, 1893, Pyke wasn't an engineer. He'd studied law and economics at Cambridge, but never graduated. He wasn't a scientist. His only advanced training was in journalism. He wasn't even a proper soldier. He'd been a foreign correspondent who got captured trying to sneak into Germany during World War I. What he was, however, was a man who thought in statistics while everyone else thought in traditions. During his internment in Ruhleben prison camp, while other prisoners despaired, Pyke collected data on previous escape attempts. He calculated success rates, analyzed failure patterns, identified the optimal timing based on guard rotations and sunset angles. On July 9, 1915, he and Edward Fawke hid under tennis nets, used the setting sun to blind patrolling guards, then climbed the perimeter fence. Most escapees were recaptured. Pyke made it back to England. The lesson? Numbers matter more than courage. Analysis beats instinct. By 1942, Pyke worked at Combined Operations Headquarters, not because of military expertise, but because Mountbatten valued unconventional thinking. While admirals studied naval tactics, Pyke studied material science. While generals planned invasions, Pyke read research papers on the properties of ice. In early 1942, staring at those shipping loss charts, Pyke had his moment of insight. The problem was material scarcity. Steel was precious. Aluminum was precious. But ice? Ice was essentially free. Water covered 71% of the planet. The North Atlantic was very, very cold. If you could make ice strong enough, stable enough, you could manufacture an aircraft carrier for 1% of the energy cost of a steel ship. He knew what the engineers would say. Ice isn't strong enough. Ice melts. Ice cracks from torpedo impacts. But what if it wasn't pure ice? Pyke recruited Dr. J.D. Bernal, a crystallographer, who brought in a young scientist named Max Perutz. Perutz had been studying glaciers and ice formation. When Pyke asked him about the feasibility of ice ships, Perutz pointed out all the reasons it wouldn't work. Icebergs roll over, surface area is insufficient, structural integrity fails under stress. Then Perutz mentioned something interesting: recent experiments with composite materials. What if you mixed ice with reinforcing fibers? Wood pulp, for instance. They ran calculations. The numbers were extraordinary. A mixture of 14% wood pulp and 86% water, when frozen, created a composite material 3 times stronger than pure ice. It resisted cracking. It absorbed impacts. Torpedoes wouldn't shatter it. They'd just make small craters that could be patched with seawater and crushed ice. It was slower to melt than regular ice. It could be cut with saws and shaped like wood. Pyke named it Pykrete. On paper, it was perfect. In practice, it would require them to break every rule of naval architecture. They needed proof. Claims meant nothing without data. In early 1942, Max Perutz requisitioned the most unlikely laboratory in British military history, a meat freezer underneath Smithfield Market in London. While butchers sold beef and pork upstairs, Perutz conducted classified weapons research below, hiding Pykrete samples behind rows of frozen animal carcasses. The workshop was crude, a refrigerated room that normally stored sides of beef, now filled with ice blocks, wood pulp, and scientific instruments. Perutz worked mostly alone, testing compression strength, melting rates, and structural integrity. The secrecy was absolute. Even the butchers didn't know that Britain's desperate hope to win the Battle of the Atlantic was being developed beneath their feet. The first test blocks exceeded expectations. Pykrete was 3 to 4 times stronger than pure ice in compression tests. But strength wasn't enough. Pykrete needed to prove it could withstand weapons. He built a firing range in the freezer. The demonstration was arranged for British military leadership, including the Chief of the Imperial General Staff. Pykrete set up 2 blocks, one pure ice, one Pykrete. He explained the composite's properties. Wood pulp fibers create a matrix structure that distributes stress, prevents crack propagation, and absorbs kinetic energy. The officers looked skeptical. This was still ice. Ice floating in the Atlantic. Someone on the project team, accounts vary on exactly who, drew a pistol. He fired at the pure ice block first. It exploded into fragments, shards skittering across the frozen floor. "Now observe Pykrete," he said, aiming at the second block. He fired. The bullet didn't penetrate. It ricocheted off the frozen composite, bounced wildly across the room, and struck the Chief of the Imperial General Staff in the shoulder. For one frozen moment, pun intended, everyone stared. Then the room erupted. Officers shouted. Medical personnel rushed forward. The shooter tried to explain that this proved the material's effectiveness, which didn't help the chief's bleeding shoulder. But here's what mattered. The bullet had ricocheted. A German torpedo, hitting Pykrete, would create only a small crater, not a catastrophic hull breach. The material worked. The demonstration, despite nearly killing a senior officer, proved Pyke's central claim. Pykrete could withstand weapons that would destroy conventional ships. Mountbatten was convinced. He took the data to Churchill, who was known for embracing extraordinary technological solutions. The Prime Minister studied the numbers. Construction cost 1% that of steel, immune to torpedoes, unsinkable even if damaged, could be manufactured in remote locations using seawater and sawdust. Churchill saw what Pyke saw, a way to close the air gap without consuming precious steel. On Churchill's directive, Project Habakkuk received official authorization in December 1942. The code name came from the Old Testament prophet. "Look among the nations, and see, wonder, and be astounded. For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told." They would build the impossible ship. The Admiralty response was immediate and hostile. Senior naval architects convened in January 1943 to review Project Habakkuk. These were men who designed destroyers, battleships, carriers, proper ships made from proper materials. They examined Pyke's specifications and declared them insane. The proposed vessel would be 2,000 feet long, longer than any ship ever built. The Pykrete hull would be 40 feet thick. It would displace 2 million tons and carry 300 aircraft. It would be defended by 40 dual-purpose guns and have multiple runways. "This is not a ship," one admiral declared. "This is a floating iceberg with delusions of grandeur." The engineering challenges seemed insurmountable. How do you keep 1.8 million tons of ice frozen in the North Atlantic? How do you prevent the Pykrete from slowly deforming under its own weight? A phenomenon called creep? How do you power the refrigeration systems? How do you propel something this massive? The room erupted with objections. The material science isn't proven at scale. Refrigeration requirements would be enormous. We'd need an internal skeleton of steel, which defeats the entire purpose. This will cost millions and deliver nothing. One naval constructor stood and delivered the killing argument. "Gentlemen, in the time it would take to build one of these ice fantasies, we could construct 3 conventional escort carriers that we know work. This project should be terminated immediately." The vote was nearly unanimous. Project Habakkuk should be canceled. But Mountbatten didn't give up. He arranged a direct presentation to the combined chiefs of staff. If the Navy wouldn't listen, perhaps Churchill and Roosevelt would. The Quebec Conference in August 1943 brought together the Allied military leadership at the Chateau Frontenac Hotel. Field Marshal Alan Brooke, Admiral Ernest King, General George Marshall, everyone who mattered was there. Mountbatten arrived with 2 blocks in a wooden crate. Inside the conference room, he placed them on the floor. One was pure ice. One was Pykrete. The assembled leaders, men accustomed to tanks and bombers and conventional weapons, stared at what looked like large ice cubes. "This," Mountbatten declared, "is the future of naval warfare." He explained Pykrete's properties: stronger than concrete, resistant to melting, impervious to torpedo damage. The admirals looked unconvinced. After all, these were blocks of ice sitting in a hotel conference room. How did this solve anything? Mountbatten pulled out his service revolver. "Allow me to demonstrate," he said, aiming at the pure ice block. He fired. The block exploded, showering the assembled military leadership with ice fragments. Field Marshal Brooke wrote in his diary, "There, that is just what I told you." "Now," Mountbatten continued, turning to face the Pykrete block, "observe the difference." What happened next, several witnesses would later record, nearly killed Admiral Ernest King. Mountbatten fired at the Pykrete. The bullet ricocheted off the frozen composite, buzzing across the room like an angry bee. It grazed King's trouser leg, tore through fabric, and buried itself in the wall. For 3 seconds, nobody breathed. Then Admiral King looked down at his torn pants, looked up at Mountbatten, and said, "I see your point." The demonstration, reckless, dangerous, and nearly catastrophic, proved everything. Pykrete wasn't just strong, it was weapon-resistant. A torpedo that would sink a steel carrier would merely dent a Pykrete hull. Churchill, who'd been watching with characteristic intensity, leaned forward. "How soon can we build one?" Mountbatten outlined the timeline. A full-scale prototype by summer 1944, operational deployment by 1945. The cost would be substantial, pound $2.5 million, but far less than conventional carriers. Roosevelt nodded. The combined chiefs, despite their reservations, approved funding. Project Habakkuk was authorized to proceed to full prototype testing. Before we continue with what happened next, if you're fascinated by forgotten World War II innovations, hit that subscribe button. We upload stories like this every week. History you've never heard told the way it deserves to be told. Patricia Lake, Alberta, Canada, January 1943. The location was perfect, remote, frozen, and far from German reconnaissance. 15 men arrived with equipment, lumber, and a classified blueprint for something the world had never seen. They would spend 2 months building a 1/50 scale prototype of Habakkuk. Even at reduced scale, the structure would be 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, and weigh 1,000 tons. The goal was simple: prove that Pykrete could be manufactured at scale, maintain structural integrity, and withstand weapons testing. The construction process revealed immediate problems. First, manufacturing Pykrete at scale was enormously labor-intensive. Workers mixed wood pulp with water, poured it into forms, and waited for it to freeze. Then they added another layer, and another. The prototype's walls were only 18 inches thick. The full-scale ship would require 40-foot walls. The math was daunting. Second, refrigeration. Even in the Canadian winter, the Pykrete absorbed solar radiation and began melting. They installed a refrigeration system, compressors, coolant lines, insulation, to maintain the structure. The system consumed enormous amounts of power. Extrapolating to a full-scale vessel, the refrigeration requirements would be staggering. Third, creep, the tendency of ice to slowly deform under sustained pressure. Over weeks, the prototype began sagging slightly. Engineers calculated that a full-scale Habakkuk would need significant steel reinforcement to maintain structural integrity. Steel reinforcement, the very thing they were trying to avoid. By March 1943, Geoffrey Pyke arrived at Patricia Lake to supervise testing. Mountbatten sent Bernal and Max Perutz as well, partly to help, partly to keep Pyke from alienating the Canadian engineers with his abrasive personality. In early April, the prototype was complete. Workers sawed it free from the ice, dry dock, holding it in place and let it drift in Patricia Lake's cold water. Then the weapons testing began. They used explosives equivalent to torpedo warheads, 250 pounds of TNT. The blast should have blown massive holes in the hull, should have flooded compartments, should have sunk the prototype immediately. The Pykrete held. Explosions created craters 3 to 4 feet deep, but the composite's fibrous structure prevented crack propagation. There was no catastrophic failure, no flooding. Workers patched the craters with seawater and crushed ice, and within hours the repairs had frozen solid. The test data vindicated Pyke's central claim. Pykrete ships were nearly unsinkable. But the project faced a darker reality, one that had nothing to do with material science and everything to do with war's changing mathematics. By May 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic was turning. New technologies, centimetric radar, Lee lights, improved depth charges, were dramatically increasing U-boat kill rates. Escort carriers, despite their vulnerabilities, were proving effective. Most critically, the Americans were mass-producing Liberty ships faster than U-boats could sink them. The air gap was closing through conventional means. Project Habakkuk's cost estimates kept rising. The refrigeration requirements demanded more steel for cooling systems. The creep problem required more steel for internal reinforcement. The revised estimate reached £2.5 million, equivalent to building multiple conventional carriers. The Canadians concluded it was impractical to attempt the project this coming season, which meant no Habakkuk vessel would be ready in 1944. By 1945, the Battle of the Atlantic might be won or lost through conventional means. The mathematics had shifted. The desperate equation that made a Pykrete carrier logical in 1942, when steel was scarce and U-boats were winning, no longer held in late 1943. In December 1943, Project Habakkuk was officially canceled. No ice carrier would patrol the Atlantic. No Pykrete hull would deflect German torpedoes. The prototype at Patricia Lake, that frozen testament to human ingenuity and desperation, was simply abandoned. The refrigeration systems were shut down. The structure began melting with the spring thaw. By summer 1945, the entire prototype had dissolved back into Patricia Lake, leaving only wooden forms and equipment on the lake bed. But here's what the official histories often miss. Project Habakkuk succeeded in ways that had nothing to do with building ships. The Pykrete research advanced composite material science decades. The refrigeration systems developed for Habakkuk informed post-war commercial cooling technology. The structural analysis of ice and fiber composites influenced everything from polar research stations to modern ice rink construction. More importantly, Habakkuk represented something crucial. In 1942, when Britain was losing, when conventional solutions had failed, when every week brought news of more convoys sunk and more sailors drowned, someone dared to think impossibly. And impossibly often works. Consider the statistics. In March 1943, U-boats sank 120 merchant ships. By May 1943, just 2 months later, the tide turned permanently. New tactics, new technologies, and yes, new ways of thinking changed the war. Did Habakkuk directly contribute? No, the ship was never built. But the mindset that created Habakkuk, the willingness to challenge engineering orthodoxy, to question assumptions, to build ice ships because steel ships were impossible, that mindset won the war. Admiral King, the man who nearly got shot during Mountbatten's demonstration, later wrote, "We won the Atlantic through a combination of courage, technology, and madmen willing to propose ice ships. Sometimes the madmen lose, but sometimes they change everything." The Patricia Lake prototype remained at the bottom until 1988, when scuba divers found the remnants, wooden forms, piping, and equipment covered in silt. Parks Canada eventually documented the site as a historic landmark. If you're still watching, we'd love your support. Hit that like button. It helps us bring you more forgotten history. And check out our Patreon for extended interviews and bonus content. Geoffrey Pyke never saw Habakkuk succeed because Habakkuk never sailed. The project's cancellation devastated him. He'd spent 2 years consumed by the ice ship, working 18-hour days, alienating colleagues, pushing every boundary. When it ended, something in Pyke broke. He continued working on other projects, improving military gliders, designing better bomb sites, but the fire was gone. By 1948, suffering from depression and chronic illness, Pyke took his own life at age 54. His obituaries barely mention Habakkuk. The project remained classified for years. Most people never knew that Britain had seriously planned to build aircraft carriers from ice. Max Perutz, the young scientist who tested Pykrete in that Smithfield meat freezer, went on to revolutionary work in molecular biology. In 1962, he won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for determining the structure of hemoglobin. In interviews late in his life, Perutz would mention his wartime work on ice, but rarely elaborated. The full story of his Pykrete research wasn't declassified until the 1980s. Lord Mountbatten, who'd nearly shot Admiral King while demonstrating Pykrete, became the last Viceroy of India and later Chief of the Defense Staff. He kept a small piece of Pykrete in his office as a reminder that the impossible is merely the untried. But what about the ice itself, the frozen composite that started everything? Pykrete isn't used in modern naval construction. Ice ships never became standard military equipment. By that measure, Project Habakkuk failed completely. Yet composite materials, the concept of mixing materials to create superior properties, became fundamental to modern engineering. Carbon fiber reinforced polymers in aircraft, fiberglass in boats, concrete with rebar. The principle Pyke stumbled onto, that mixing ice with wood pulp creates something stronger than either alone, applies to thousands of modern materials. Arctic researchers still study Pykrete when designing temporary structures in polar regions. The material's properties, strong, insulating, easily manufactured from available materials, make it ideal for short-term polar installations. In 2003, Mythbusters built a small boat from Pykrete, proving the concept worked. The boat floated, carried weight, and was indeed bulletproof. It eventually melted, but it worked. The real legacy of Project Habakkuk isn't the ship that was never built. It's the lesson that in desperate times, someone must be willing to propose the impossible. In 1942, Britain was losing. Conventional wisdom said there was no solution to the air gap. Every expert agreed steel was the only option, and steel wasn't available. Geoffrey Pyke, a journalist with no engineering credentials, a man the Navy called a crackpot, looked at that impossible problem and thought, what if we used ice? He was wrong about many specifics. The ship was never practical, but he was right about the principle. Sometimes the solution lies not in doing the possible better, but in attempting the impossible. Project Habakkuk didn't win the Battle of the Atlantic, but it represented the spirit that did.